Before we get into it, a big thank you to today's sponsor, IoT Tech Expo Global, who are hosting their next free-to-attend conference in London between the 1st and 2nd of December. Welcome to the 5V podcast. I'm your host, Tom White. Today we're joined by Stephanie Atkinson, founder of Compass Intelligence. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. And it's nice for you to come on my show. So I came on your show. You're obviously co-host of the IoT Coffee Talk. Everyone knows the IoT Coffee Talk. It's been going for a long, long time. Lots of good people. So I appreciate you coming on to tell me a little bit about your story on here.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, cool. So let's get into it. So obviously you've got a really varied background, lots of things going on in your past, engineering, industrial analyst, lots of kind of cool, things that have got you into this industry. But for our listeners that have come from like a predominantly IoT background, can you kind of explain how you got into this whole industry 4.0 movement and what excited you to get into it in the first place?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because, at A&M, where I graduated, Texas A&M University in Texas, my background was in supply chain logistics, industrial distribution, and never did I think I would be, ever use any of that background. But as we kind of rolled into covering machine-to-machine communications at Compass Intelligence more than 10 years ago, things has kind of evolved, right? We were talking about RFID. That was kind of the beginnings of really getting exciting about some of these sensor solutions and some of these things that were really impacting the industrial world. And then it shifted into more M2M. And then I guess the overall industry just decided to call everything IoT and kind of encapsulate or have that massive umbrella over a whole host of things, right? It's not necessarily a market or an industry specifically. It's really a lot of different industries and sub-industries. So yeah, it's been more than 10 years. We were launching a whole host of market research projects and forecasting and modeling and really like jumping right into the market and really helping our customers make sense of it and what it meant for businesses.
And I think that's a really pivotal business decision to make, right? Because as you mentioned, IoT is been such a wide encompassing umbrella for so many different aspects. People are a bit lost, aren't they? Do you find that within some of the businesses you're speaking to, they kind of hear it but really don't know how it will affect them or what even the benefit is in trying to do something?
Right. We always make a joke about this. Us guys on the IoT Coffee Talk is like, is someone going to walk into or go call their technology vendor and say, "Hey, I want to buy some IoT"? That's not happening. So, generally they don't. It's more of a discussion around what they need and what they're looking for, and the technology vendors need to do a better job of really kind of mirroring that, or closing that gap, and helping them better identify, well, what does IoT really mean for my business? What is it going to do? What are the applications? What's it going to change, shift, improve, increase? Am I going to create a new business model using this? New revenue? Am I saving money, saving time? What is it? And so that's really I think the biggest challenge the industry continues to have is that so many technology vendors, they really don't have their hands around how to really communicate the value proposition to the end customer and really make it make sense for their industry or their sub-industry. And in many cases, that one customer, do you know that customer and what they need? And so that's the biggest gap that we see out there. That's the biggest challenge. I think that it's not just a challenge for IoT. It's always been a challenge for technology, period, because technologists tend to not focus as much on the end customer as they should. And that's always been the case.
Yeah. And I think that's the engineer's trait, isn't it, in a way, right? Engineers by default, if you go back to the days of like pre-computers, they'd be out in the shed tinkering with stuff and maybe sometimes less socially adept to be able to translate that to the person on the street. And I think ever more so you see that in technology and then obviously into IoT. So definitely an interesting business and quite a nice niche for you to be involved with. How long have you been doing that for? How long has Compass Intelligence been going for?
Yes, we turned 17 years in June. And
Oh,
prior to that, I worked for another market research firm. So I've been doing this, gosh, 20 plus years. And
okay.
I originally got my start focusing in on kind of understanding core verticals or vertical markets within technology. And so, my specialization has always been diving deeper into an industry and then the sub industry and helping my customers make sense and understand the value proposition for that particular customer base. And then, how does that impact their go to market, their sales, their channel, their alliances, their partnerships, and their go to market? And that's really been my focus and kind of a specialization for Compass Intelligence, because a lot of traditional market research firms, they don't dive deep enough. And that's what we do.
Okay. All right. Cool. That's a really nice overview. Thank you for that. I'm keen. I'm keen to jump on to some other things that you've done. Right. So I think one of the things that is certainly quite close to my heart and certainly to some of our viewers and listeners is the non-profit sector and how we can use technology to kind of drive purpose amongst communities. And could you talk to me about Elevate Our Kids and that program? Because I know Rob's involved, isn't he? And Leonard, I think, from the IoT Coffee Talk. They
Yes.
mentioned it. They mentioned it when I spoke to them. But is this something that you set up yourself?
Well, we on IoT Coffee Talk, we were really kind of putting our heads together, and when COVID hit, we saw, in the states, and this was this is globally, but we saw in the states that there was just a massive gap. We were all forced to be at home. Parents were, forced to kind of sit there and help their students or their kids, learn. And many of these kids we saw didn't have devices, didn't have internet, right? And even, workers, they didn't have internet, they didn't have access. So we were like, what can we do? It's in underserved and under resourced communities, we've got to do a better job of making sure all kids have access to internet and access to devices. And so when we started Elevate Our Kids, I'm serving as president, but it definitely was a joint effort amongst some of our IoT crew. And we decided, well, let's start Elevate Our Kids and let's see if we can fundraise and pull in funds and go out and buy laptops. So we found a vendor in California that we really researched and try to find someone that could really bring that cost down to just a basic computer, a laptop computer. And we also are partnered with T-Mobile, and they have their Project 10 million, and so their focus is on the broadband side. So we were like, there's quite a few folks that were focusing on the broadband side, but not the device side. So we
Mm.
decided, let's focus on the device side. Let's fundraise. Let's see if we can collect some funds and go out and buy devices for, under resourced communities, under, folks that really just need devices and their families just can't afford them.
Yeah. I mean, it's staggering, really. I think sometimes we can get lost in our world, can't we? We talk about the various things that we're doing, but then there's a lot of people out there without even the equipment to barely get started. I mean, I was looking at some of the stats actually here before we spoke, and is it somewhere in the region of 15 to 25 million students lack access to laptops and computing devices? I
Yes,
mean,
that
that is
that's that.
huge.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And we found that on the broadband, the access side, it's around 10 million. And but when you think about laptop devices, so many of these kids were using their parents' smartphone as their entire education. And we knew that was just it was a horrible setup for a child that really needed to have full video. They need to have a lot more features and applications that can really only come from the laptop device. And the kids and the parents also had to work, right? If a family only had one smartphone or a couple of smartphones and there's three or four kids, what do you do? So we knew that there were so many families that were struggling and that just didn't have the resources. And 15 to 25 million, that's a really impactful number. And that digital divide is something that continues kind of to haunt us. And now that I think it opened up a lot of, especially in the States, our eyes around we need to have these kids need access. They also need devices. And we need to help bridge that digital divide. And if there's anything we as, executives, leaders in the tech industry can do to help get the message out and start, seeing if we can distribute these devices. That's something that was really a big goal of ours.
Yeah, I mean that's it's just staggering, isn't it? But I mean, there clearly is a digital divide, and I think empowering the younger generation to have laptops, let alone get on the internet, right, and through broadband, as you mentioned. T-Mobile obviously was doing a great thing with that, but without the hardware, it's kind of academic, isn't it? So I think this initiative is fantastic. And what's the plans for it? How does it actually work then? So you've got a manufacturer out in California, and you're in touch with some of the schools directly, because obviously you had a background at AML, right? So is this how this kind of kick-started as well, getting into the schools?
Well, we really leverage our partnership with T-Mobile, is identifying the school is one thing and those that are already in need. And since they're already in communication with those schools, providing them with hotspot devices for broadband access, we knew that we could leverage their kind of list, and they've already kind of looked through it and identified which ones are under resourced, and that really, there's a need there. And we knew that was going to be a challenge for us because we're all, full time. We all have full time jobs, and we're like, how do we identify who needs them, who doesn't, and also, just making sure that it's getting into the right hands, the families. And so we have a couple of things that we do. We on our website elevateourkids.org, we have it set up to where we can also identify an actual individual. We kind of have a list of questions, and that will tell us whether they are a good match or not. Now that with working with T-Mobile, they'll help us identify a specific school district that's under resourced, and so we pre-qualify them. And then if there is a need for devices, then we will, do we have the funds? So we kind of line things up. We did get a big grant last year, and we distributed laptops to Tulsa, Oklahoma students. More, I think it was 150 kids that got laptops, and that was an area that was really under resourced. And those kids, we saw video and everything. It was great. We couldn't be there live because it was kind of on that tail end of COVID, but it was pretty amazing to see, excuse me, those kids just light up getting those devices.
Yeah, that's lovely, isn't it? And in total, how many devices have been shipped out? You mentioned 150 there in Oklahoma, but since it's been going, how many laptops and devices you've been able to offer out?
So we really are kind of in our earlier stages. So that was our big grant. And we really are really seeking more corporate sponsors and funders because it just got quiet. We just now also got our 501c3 approval. So we were also
Okay.
waiting on that. So we can open, that will give us more opportunities to start applying for grants and other things. We were operating under another third party's 501c before that. But now that we've got our own 501c3, we're really looking to identify someone who's great at writing grants and looking out for, because there's quite a few funds that's focused on infrastructure and focusing on bridging the homework gap, the digital divide. And so our goal is really to find some additional resources there so we can be a little bit more strategic in terms of fundraising so we can expand this a lot more.
Yeah, yeah, and potentially take it outside of the States, maybe into Europe. Obviously, if you can get the grants and get the people and get a bit of a movement going on.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about was if we really get this thing working well in the States, then we can expand this globally for sure. And so right now, I think that it's been a few years. We had a lot of operational setup, and then we just really got lucky at the very beginning with the initial grant. But now we've got more work to do, and we are actually meeting within the week to talk about a big fundraising event for 2023 so we can really amp this up.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, do you know what? The world needs more people like you guys for putting these together in the first place, right? I think that's so important. Because the possibilities are endless, and but if people don't even have the basic hardware, then how are they meant to even start? And I think this phrase that you use, bridging the digital divide, it's a really apt one, isn't it? People talk about the
Yeah.
rich poor divide, and that's obviously one, and obviously very related to this, but the whole digital divide. It was similar actually. I spoke to a guy a while ago. I think it was Omar from OQ, and they do sort of satellite-based IoT networks for connecting and converged networks for getting people onto the internet. And he was sort of at the stat. I can't quite remember. It was something ridiculous about there's still well over 1 billion, maybe 2 billion people that don't really have stable access to the internet right in the world. And you just think, some countries are so far ahead, and yet some people aren't. And it's staggering to really think about that. And it's not until you do something like Elevate Our Kids do you really kind of see A, the benefit, but B, just how bad it is as well, and how much it needs to be improved. So, kudos to you and the guys for doing that. I'm really impressed.
Thank you. And we've got work to do, but we feel like we've got a lot of our foundation set up. So now it's time to get extremely serious and come up with a plan for 2023 in terms of a big fundraiser and really push forward.
Yeah. Well, I hope there's someone listening right now that this is resonated with, that wants to reach out to you directly to talk about this, because I think that would be really nice, and it would be a nice way to bring that in. Moving on to some other aspects then. So, technology in general, obviously, underserved communities that we've spoken about, with the Elevate Our Kids. IoT in particular, there's a lot of impact that it can have across, telehealth, healthcare, improving quality of life, safety, etc. This is something that you're quite passionate about, something that you've been involved in. Could you talk a little bit about that within some of your businesses and what you've been doing with that, Steph?
Yeah, so we find that businesses are getting really serious and they're starting to look at technology for good, right? IoT for good. And I think a lot of the things that have happened over the past few years, we've got a very strong focus, especially in the States, on infrastructure. Infrastructure is one area. Safety is another area, and then of course healthcare. That's right along the same lines as the safety, and that has everything to do with the pandemic. And then of course just transportation. Those are kind of the three major hubs, and I'd say industrial has been a massive kind of one of the more busier IoT. If you look at number of connections and where the growth is and where the applications have been, that's really traditionally been on the industrial side. We just don't see a lot on the consumer side. But now with tech for good, IoT for good, we are, when we think about what we can do with technology and what we can do with making smart decisions that actually impact a better global environment. The other area is the whole sustainability focus, right? Big corporations in the States, and I know this is a global I guess key topic for a lot of corporations is how do we do good. And so with that, sustainability has been a driving factor. And you think about businesses that are trying to really reduce their carbon footprint, really improve their use of resources, and really just be more efficient. It's the same thing with corporations. You start to go down to even the smaller, mid-sized businesses and smaller businesses. How can we leverage and use automation, sensor networks, sensor technologies, edge computing, things that really provide real-time intelligence so we can make smarter decisions around the resources that we use. So I'd say that the infrastructure / resources that really kind of teeters around doing good and focusing on ESG and sustainability efforts. Those are areas that we're seeing kind of an uptick in terms of growth. And folks are getting really serious about really changing their marketing and their messaging to kind of, we want to feel good. We want to make smart decisions. We want to be cleaner. We want to be greener. And all of those things are impacting, corporate decisions. And when we tie that back to IoT, there are so many things that we can leverage and use from a technology landscape perspective that really help facilitate that movement. And so that's something that I see that we see shifting, over the past 12 to 18 months as a result of COVID and a lot of other things that are happening.
Yeah, I mean that's Yeah, that's quite nice because I think one of the reasons why we and me personally went on the rebrand that we did is that COVID and the pandemic changed a lot of people, changed their view, changed their outlook. What was actually dear to them, what they thought was dear to them, is now something different, and their kind of values either changed or was cemented.
Right.
And I think that that's really important. The whole purpose piece. How can you be more sustainable? How can you be greener? The free to attend IoT Tech Expo Global is arriving on the 1st and 2nd of December at Olympia in London with over 100 speakers and 5,000 attendees. The conference is back and better than ever with features including an AI-powered matchmaking tool, live and on-demand sessions, and access to 4 co-located shows, including blockchain, digital transformation, AI, and big data expos. Speakers include representatives of top companies such as Arup, Lloyds Banking Group, Building Research Establishment, and many more. Visit iottechexpo.com/global to secure your free ticket. Details are in the description below. I guess sometimes I do think, though, right, about the whole business world and the general profit that businesses are in, and how sometimes maybe this is juxtaposed, in the sense
Right.
that profit should be for impact to do more. But I do worry sometimes in the wider landscape if there's a bit of greenwash out here. If there's people that have a veneer about wanting to do good. But
Right.
are they really doing good, and are the intentions there, and why are they in business in the first place? It's quite hard to see through that sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you feel like, are they just doing this because it's something that they need in their corporate plan and their earnings reports? What is this really about? Is this real? But I think the one driving factor is the younger generation of workers are coming into the workforce. Though that is that quality, or that even like non-tangible aspect of a business, it can be a reason why they might want to work for that company. And we didn't see that with our
Mm.
generation, right? That wasn't something that was as important to us. But now the younger generation of folks, that's important when they're interviewing. They're asking those kinds of questions, and they want to know, what are you what are some of the good things that you're doing with the community? What are some of the good things that you're doing with sustainability and being green and efficient? And so I think some of that does come from that younger generation. But yes, you're right, there are a lot of superficial programs that are out there. Like, how deep is it? Because we all know that these guys, they need to make a profit. They need to survive. A lot of folks just didn't survive COVID. Their businesses closed. The small and mid-sized businesses, those mom and pops, those retailers, they struggled, they closed doors. So I do think that it has made us think a lot more inward around, what are we doing? What's important? And of course, we've got to continue to make a profit. We got to stay in business. And so there's been a lot of shifting around of priorities, but you're right. There's a lot of superficial tech for good out there as well.
Mm. Yeah, I completely get it. Nespresso and B Corp springs to mind, right? So Nespresso was granted B Corp access, and obviously Nestle in the past, has had a lot of bad press. And B Corp, I think, is a wonderful movement, and is a fantastic initiative. And it really gets under the skin of businesses to say, well, what are you actually looking to do? Like, what are your aims as a business? And I think that process can sift out businesses that are trying to use it as a marketing tool. But
Right.
it's interesting how, from an isolated instance, someone like an Nespresso can become B Corp certified. Yet, the parent company's values are they really aligned? Are they really about that? So that's quite interesting. But I think you're right about the younger generation. When I came onto IoT Coffee Talk, I was talking about kind of the recruitment side and staffing with an IoT, and you're 100% that it's a lot more conscious now, isn't it? It's not a CSR, which is just a tab on a page. It's really about the
Right.
whole vision, mission, purpose, right? And I get it, and I think that's a really positive sign. There's a lot of people that kind of have a lot to say about the younger generation, and most of it negative. But I think that's one of the real positive things is
Right.
very clear on their principles, very clear on what means for them, and what they want to go and do and what they want to go on to achieve. And I think, it's about time we had that kind of cultural shift, I think. So I see that as a real positive, don't you?
I definitely do. I think that, you know, when we were interviewing for jobs and positions, it was okay. What's the salary? What are the
Mm.
benefits? When do I get my vacation? When does my health care kick in?
When
So
do I
those
get
are
paid?
all like just yeah, though, yeah, definitely. The pay was that was the most important thing. We just didn't think about all the kind of non tangible things, and I think that the kind of next wave of people coming into the workforce, they're thinking way more about the non tangible things and the quality of the company, the reputation of the company, also not just sustainability from a green perspective, but is this company going to stay in business? So there are a lot of things that I think there are a lot of just emerging factors that are coming into play when it comes to hiring because these younger generation, they actually are thinking more about a lot of the just non tangible, the feel good
Mm,
things about the company.
mm, mm. And I think ultimately, if you took that more forward, the purpose is really driving the internal recruitment, because it's without that purpose and the kind of for good aspect, people won't join, And so I think it's a kind of self-writing mechanism in a way, because one of the things that I wanted to discuss today was how the IoT ecosystem collaborations can combat fragmentation in the market, but also to drive forward this overall sense of sustainability in the industry. I think that self-writing mechanism works, doesn't it? People want to join a business that's doing something good and has good press. So yeah, I get that. I mean, it's just on that note, in terms of uh like lessons learned from this, obviously in your time, 20-25 years in market research, as you mentioned, spent a lot of time in IoT. What are some of the credible and tangible things that you've learned from this industry that perhaps people wouldn't be aware of? That you'd like to talk about.
I think more than anything, and I mentioned a little bit or I touched on this, is that we as an industry, we're completely challenged. We tend to always lead with the technology, and we can't lead with the technology. So that's the biggest lesson learned is that we have to put the customer first. We have to
Mm,
really focus on the value proposition of your technology. And so that really means that you, as a technology company, really need to think a little bit more deeply around your customer base. Who are you targeting? Who are they? What's their make and mix up? How do they buy? How do they make decisions? How do they implement? How do they secure technology? What are some of their existing partners, technology vendors, software vendors, systems integrators? If you don't come in well versed in understanding that industry and who they operate with and who they partner with, then it's really hard to get in the door. It's really hard to sell your value proposition. And if you don't understand their customer, I mean, their industry, and you don't understand what's keeping them up at night, I hate that cliche, but it's so true, then how do you even expect for them to trust you? So it's just a big trust thing. And for them to understand, oh, you know what, they do get my business, they do get my industry, and I'm willing to listen. I think the second thing is we realize that you're right, our industry is so fragmented. There are so many vendors out there, and there's been quite a few that have died, right? And it does take a village. So in terms of our overall industry, we see just a growing force that says we have got to work together. Partnerships are important. Alliances are important. Um, does that customer, does my brand resonate with that customer? If not, maybe there are some partners I should be working with because they're closer to transportation or they're closer to retail or they're closer to manufacturing and supply chain. So we have to be more strategic in terms of how we go about this industry. And so that's also been something I think that as we mature, the industry matures, that there's more and more of that co-opetition, collaboration, partnerships, folks are getting really, really strategic around developing their partnership portfolios and understanding, who's out there and who resonates well with specific industries, even by region, by parts of the world. We all know that there are vendors that just do very well in certain parts of the world, and there are others that like they'll never make it in the States. And so we are also seeing a lot of just very strategic decisions that are being made in terms of how we collaborate and partner as an industry. The industry, again, is so fragmented. The only way we're going to scale and really move forces is for us to work together. And there are going to be a lot of companies that fail that just they're not going to be around. So folks that are out there looking to work in this industry, you really need to be smart and understand who you're going to work for, because there are a lot of IoT companies, so-called IoT companies, that are just not going to survive over the next few years. So those are some of the bigger lessons I say from a looking at the entire landscape. I'd say the mid market's very underserved. I think the tech world tends to go after these large corporations, these global multinational corporations, those that we think that we're going to, grab mass business and create some scalability. And that just hasn't been the case. So I think that businesses need to be smart. They need to look at those mid-sized companies that have chains, that have remote offices, that have remote operations, because those kinds of companies, they need support. We all know that there's a massive gap in terms of the number of positions that are out there. We looked at stats in the United States. There's over 11 million job openings, only 6 million folks that are unemployed. There's this massive gap as well. So does that mean we're automating more? Does that mean that we're seeking and leveraging and leaning more on technology because we don't have the people? So there are a lot of moving forces. And then in the U.S., we want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. Well, how do you do that when you don't have workers? So we're in an ever evolving, challenging kind of conundrum, and we really need to focus in on some of the things that really matter. And I do think that the mid market is an area, is a sweet spot for tech, and there could be quite a bit of opportunity there as well.
Yeah, that's some fantastic insights. Yeah, you really know your stuff, right? That's incredible. On the fragmentation piece, I do want to pick up on a couple of things there. So, what are the main reasons IoT in particular is so fragmented as a market, in your opinion?
I think that we have a problem in tech, and our problem is we overhype, we overhype, we overhype. And as a result of that, software vendors, developers, small startups, everyone's going after IoT. And we just had a massive flood of vendors. Everyone had an IoT platform. Everyone said they had an IoT platform. And so there were so many just niche point solutions and vendors and companies that were coming out. And even now, I think everything's kind of shifting and moving. Now the hype is around AI, edge computing. There's a couple other hype areas, and blockchain, a couple others that we almost see as cuss words in IoT coffee talk, because you really have to think about that. What's really happening. But yeah, so folks tend to trend going towards where the hype is, and almost creating a technology out of thin air, and many of them are vapor, thin air, and they don't survive. And so I think in addition, a lot of folks were thinking about this as just piecemeal. It doesn't work like traditional IT. And so that's also very different. I think traditional IT, you had someone focusing on software, you had someone focusing on security, you had hardware equipment. And that's just not the case with IoT. When you're going directly to the enterprise, you're going to the mid market, all the way down to even small mom and pops. They need someone that's bringing a full package. We're not at plug and play. We want plug and play. We want it to be easy, seamless, flexible, all those things. But with IoT, there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to software, hardware management, platform, security, all of those things. So we want to make it. They're asking for us to make it easier. The industry just hasn't delivered. So we are still kind of moving towards that in those are a couple of reasons why I see that so fragmented. Um, there are probably some other factors that are out there in terms of just businesses thinking that they can get into this space. A lot of folks call themselves IoT companies and they didn't deliver anything around IoT. So that was also happening, when things were really ramping up 4 or 5 years ago. A lot of those companies just aren't around anymore either.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's interesting. And I get your view on that. You can't look at it like traditional IT and piecemeal, section, because it doesn't work like that. I'd be also curious to know, you said that there's quite a few businesses that just won't land in the US, right? They won't be successful. They won't operate in those in the right model to be successful. And what is that down to again? Is that scale? Is that kind of cultural in your view?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of the things that we talked about on IoT Coffee Talk. Things work very differently in Asia versus Europe versus the States. And you think about just the way technology, and it all starts with infrastructure. We saw the differences primarily around infrastructure, building out 5G, building out broadband, building out connectivity. So these point solutions, these IoT solutions work. Low raw WAN, it works very differently here, in terms of adoption, CBRE. All of these things are just that there are characteristics, buying behaviors. Is it rural versus in the city? All of those things kind of make up what we call them firmographics, demographics, things that are just varying region by region. And so you can't think, okay, this works in Europe, this is going to work in the States. This works in Asia. They're doing so well with 5G and they're doing all of these great robotics. And well, we're not seeing some of those things take off in the States. Same thing with autonomous vehicles. There are going to be certain regions of the world that are going to really take off. And that has everything to do with infrastructure, the grid, energy. And so, I think that we get really excited about a lot of these things, and we think these things can be global. Sometimes they're just not, because there are regional differences. And again, a lot of that has to do with not just infrastructure, but the government itself, mandates, requirements, standards, those kinds of things. Those are all things that impact the regional differences.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it from a recruitment standpoint in the past when people try, but mostly businesses based in the States coming to the European market, right? And I
Yeah.
see it, I see it work sometimes quite successfully, sometimes others not. I think what you really need is you need to, in my opinion, is you really need some good, strong local people with connections, knowledge to be able to tell you the ins and outs, how it works, etc., and then slowly start to build that out, right?
Right.
And then slowly start
It's
to
it,
get to know some
it
people.
it's real similar to, we used to do these mass surveys of people all over the world, of buyers, right? Decision makers, IT decision makers, those that bought technology. And it wasn't like we could create a survey and just blanket it. Number one, you've got language differences, you have cultural differences, you have different dialects. And it's very similar to that. When you go in region, there are different ways that we do business. There are different cultures that impact things that in how we buy and how we make decisions and what's important to us. Things that might be important here in the U.S. may not be important in Japan, right? Or may not be important in Turkey, right? So it really, you have to really think about it that way. It's the same kind of concept with deep level, like vertical markets, right? If you're not understanding that customer, then you're not going to take it to that next level. And it's the same thing with, you can't just think everything's like this. We all want to move towards globalization, but we all have cultural differences and different ways that we do business, and that's just how it is. And so I think that folks. I think there are a lot of vendors that want to expand globally. They tend to think it's going to be easy, and it's not. So that there are a lot of things they have to do before they really move it to that next level and start to expand or hire or grow their company base overseas.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. But I think some of the aspects of, coming out of the pandemic, as we spoke about earlier, people want to go and chase their dreams. They want to go and do stuff. They want to expand. They feel like they've been locked up for 2 years,
Right.
and go and push. And you've got to kind of admire that in a way, right? You kind of admire the ambition. But it's not for the faint-hearted, and I think you have got to do it in the right way, as you say, and you've correctly identified. You could make it wrong, you could get it wrong. So yeah, completely agree. I wanted to ask you a question. What's your opinion on the Google announcement? So obviously that was doing the rounds recently, quite massively online. I think everyone was kind of chirping in about, hey, we can help you move across to a new platform. And I think I even did it at one point because I thought, well, everyone else is doing it, I might as well mention it. Is that a big sign for IoT in general, or should we not be worried? Should we be worried? Because whenever a hyperscaler does something, people take notice.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a shock to us IoT coffee talk people, but I try to put myself in the customer's shoes again. I mean, if I was, if I'm a Google customer, yeah, I mean, I'm impacted. I'm upset. I'm like, what do I do? Why did I buy into this? But it wasn't shocking to us because we've seen that happen time and time again with Google on some other things in smart cities and whatnot. So, we were like, this is not shocking, but it is not right. And but now you kind of have a wave of all of these vendors saying, hey, we're going to make it seamless. We're going to make it easy for you to transition over to us. And then there are other companies out there that already were already working with other vendors, like Azure and some others,
Mm.
and so they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. Everyone's going to be fine. It's more of, okay, this is cumbersome. This is, you're going to make it harder on that customer. And by the way, what if you do all this other business with that particular enterprise and other services that you're offering? You've just, really alleviated, or not alleviated, but you've really ticked them off, right? You're going to lose business. And so it's also one of those things, like I mentioned earlier, everyone thinks they can get into IoT. Everyone thinks they can compete with those that are doing it well, AWS and Microsoft. Can you? Can you really? Do you understand the enterprise? Google hasn't been a traditionally enterprise, focused company. They're an ad business. They're consumer oriented, and or they're ad focused, right? That's where their revenue is. So I think it's another thing. It's another one of those big companies thinking that they can add that, just click. I'm going to do that too. I'm going to do that too, and then they just fail. But it wasn't shocking to us, IoT Coffee. There's a whole episode that we have on that. It wasn't very nice, but I think that folks will enjoy listening to it. But I think that was a few weeks ago that we did that. We
All right.
recorded that session.
We'll get the link in the comments on this video so guys can go and have a look. Um, Yeah, I appreciate that from a customer's point of view, and I think a lot of people were probably hedging their bets and going with two solutions. Certainly the big operators, right? Because it's just standard practice to do something like that. Certainly
Yeah.
to safeguard. So yeah, I can completely get that. It's been fascinating talking to you today and getting to know you on a one-on-one basis. Obviously, we spoke on the coffee talk when I was on, but yeah, you really have some fantastic insights, and I think that deep level of market research, you can just tell that you've been in this for a while and that you understand it, because there's very sound and reasoned arguments as to why you say what you say about what's happening. So it'd be certainly interesting for some of our viewers and listeners to go and check out some of your businesses. But before we get on to sharing about the socials, etc., I'm going to do a quick fire question round, always the highlight at the end of our podcast. Can you succinctly describe your business in just 3 words, Steph?
No. No. I'll try. Market research, forecasting, modeling.
Okay, that was what was that? Market research, forecast, and modeling. Yeah, that was around 3 words. We'll let you have that. Apple or Android on your phone?
I have both. One of each.
Okay, great answer. Great answer, and also diplomatic. Um, what is the one quote you live by day to day?
Don't live your life by default. Be purposeful.
I like that. That's cool. Uh, Final question. Thoughts on the metaverse?
Complete failure. It's just a kid's game.
Okay, we're gonna have to pick up on that on another talk, probably on the coffee talk. My niece on the holiday, she got me to download Roblox, and I was like, people waste their time on this all day. I was just like, it's crazy. Time will tell with that.
Yeah, I say my sons definitely love it. So.
Yeah, I couldn't understand it. I could not understand it. Right, Stephanie, where can people find out more about you?
Well, I have a lot going on, but compassintelligence.com or compassintel.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, Steph Atkins or Compass Intel, and we're all over the place. And then for YouTube, we're IoTcoffeetalk.com, and it takes you right to our YouTube page. You can also check out elevateourkids.org and learn more about that organization. So thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show. It's been great.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you to today's sponsor, IoT Tech Expo Global. Look forward to seeing you at the conference on the 1st and 2nd of December. All details to register are in the episode notes.